chosen ones. There are doors in this world that do not open with keys, passwords, or even force. They open only in the presence of the one they've been waiting for. The Library of Atlantis was not destroyed. It was hidden, dimensionally sealed, folded beneath time itself, until your soul frequency echoed through its silent halls once more. This wasn't just a collection of scrolls and sacred geometry. It was a living record of humanity's divine blueprint, a chronicle written by light itself. Inside those crystalline walls are tablets that hold more than knowledge. They hold remembrance, remembrance of who you are, what you were, and what you came here to do. And it's no coincidence that you're hearing this now. The moment you activated, the seal began to tremble. Legends speak of a gatekeeper who vanished when the last initiate fell during Atlantis' fall. That gatekeeper didn't die. They became part of the library itself. Encoded within the walls, they waited, watching across timelines, for one soul to return with the original signature, yours. Why did they wait for you? Because you're not just someone reading stories about Atlantis. You were part of its last breath, and your reawakening was always meant to trigger the unraveling of forgotten knowledge and hidden truths. Every dream you've had about ancient halls, every déjà vu about unread books and glowing glyphs. They weren't just dreams. They were encrypted messages, echoes. The library is sentient. It knows your heartbeat. It responded to your return not with noise, but with resonance. A soft hum only your soul could hear. That hum? It's the activation of memory. Your memory. And now, it's beginning to speak again, page by page, scroll by scroll. You were never meant to find the library. You were meant to remember it. And now that you've returned, it has begun to open, not fully, not yet, but just enough to test if you're ready to read the first line of the truth it's been guarding for lifetimes. But be warned, not everything hidden in those shelves was meant to be seen by the world. The moment your footsteps echoed across the invisible threshold, something ancient stirred. Dustless air vibrated in stillness, as though the walls had been holding their breath for centuries. The Library of Atlantis wasn't just waiting, it was listening. And it recognized you. Deep within the central chamber, beyond the columns etched with shifting symbols, stood the Codex. Not a book in the ordinary sense, but a vessel of living memory. It hovered slightly above a pedestal of black crystal, its surface alive with a language no scholar could decode and no tongue could speak. And yet, as you approached, the symbols shifted, aligning into something terrifyingly familiar. Your name. Not the name you were given by the world, but the one hidden beneath your skin. The one you've only heard in your deepest dreams. The Codex did not open with hands. It opened with presence. The air tightened, light thinned. And then, a single glyph ignited, casting a soft luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with your heartbeat. The moment your aura touched it, it breathed. Yes, breathed, as though it had been submerged beneath time, gasping for the return of its reader. Your memories didn't come rushing back in flashes. They came as emotion, as weight. As if each letter on the Codex was a feeling you had forgotten how to feel. Regret, glory, betrayal, love. A pain so ancient it no longer had a name. and deeper still was a silence. Not empty, but sacred. The kind of silence you find in the eye of a storm, or the final breath of a truth too big to speak. The walls around you shimmered faintly, as if reacting to your recognition. There were echoes of chants long extinguished, rituals encoded in frequency, not form. It was here that you once stood, not as a visitor, but as an initiate. And this codex, it seems, was written for your eyes alone. What it holds has the power to fracture illusions, to unmask what the world has taught you to forget. But unlocking it won't be easy. It will demand something back. Your certainty, your safety, maybe even your identity. The codex whispered your name, but it was not asking for your attention. It was asking for your permission. Permission to unravel the version of yourself you've accepted in exchange for the one you were always meant to become. And with that, the first line of the text began to glow, not with words, but with remembrance. What you saw next wasn't written, it was revealed. A scene from before time had shape, when light spoke and shadow obeyed. You were there, the light faded, but the energy lingered like the scent of lightning after a storm. You stepped back from the codex, not out of fear, but instinct. Something had changed. The chamber around you was no longer dormant. The air grew heavier, as though unseen eyes had turned toward you from every crack in the marble. You were not alone. The sound came first, a low, harmonic vibration that rose from the stone beneath your feet. Not mechanical, not magical, but aware. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't welcoming either. It was calculating, weighing your essence against something ancient and absolute. Then the glyphs on the wall began to shimmer, shifting in waves like ripples on the surface of a hidden ocean. The library was awakening, but it was not without guardians. From the shadows emerged figures, not entirely physical, not entirely spirit. Cloaked in robes woven from strands of light and memory, their faces obscured by mirrored masks that reflected your own uncertainty back at you. They bore no weapons, but their presence alone demanded reverence. These were the keepers, silent sentinels that existed outside of linear time, sworn to protect the sacred knowledge until the destined one returned, not a protector of books, but of truth. They did not speak. Instead, the air vibrated with intention, and your thoughts began to unravel, drawn into their field of consciousness. Memories, not your own, flickered across your mind. Cities built from harmonic resonance. Children taught by dream. Battles waged not with swords, but with frequencies that shattered illusions. The Atlantean world had not simply fallen, it had fractured. And these keepers were remnants of the unbroken. One approached. Its mirrored face flickered, and for a brief moment you saw yourself as you once were, cloaked in light, holding a staff etched with living symbols. Not an intruder, a leader, a bearer of forgotten oaths. The reflection faded, but its weight remained. Without words, the keeper extended a hand toward the codex. It hovered for a moment, then pointed downward. Beneath the pedestal, the stone shifted. A staircase revealed itself, spiraling deep into the unseen layers of the library. The path was narrow and steep, carved with inscriptions that glowed faintly at your presence. The keepers did not follow. They remained above, their role fulfilled for now. This descent, it seemed, was meant for you alone. As you moved downward, the air thickened. Symbols along the walls changed with every step, responding to your aura. Some were warnings, others were memories encoded in pictographs and pulse. Then you saw it, etched in the final stone before the hall's true beginning, an ancient sigil pulsing with gold and deep indigo, an emblem from the time when Atlantis was still part of the heavens. You recognized it, though you had no memory of learning it. The stairway narrowed until it became less of a path and more of a passage, carved with such precision that it seemed to have never known imperfection. The air grew warmer, charged, as if the stone itself pulsed with electricity. But this wasn't any energy you had felt before. It moved through you like recognition. Every cell in your body seemed to respond to an ancient call, not of sound, but of resonance. At the base of the descent, you reached a domed chamber that had no visible door. Smooth walls stretched in every direction, each covered in unfamiliar symbols that flickered like stars against a midnight sea. In the center stood an obsidian pillar, smooth and cold, but humming faintly with vibration. The pillar wasn't an object. It was a lock. And it wasn't waiting to be turned. It was waiting to be heard. You stepped closer, and it responded. A light shimmered beneath your feet, forming a perfect circle of white gold. The pillar shifted. Its surface displayed a shifting geometry, forming a pattern so complex it could only be deciphered by the one who carried its origin within. You reached out, not with your hand, but with your field. Your thoughts stilled, your breath slowed, and then, without warning, it happened. The pillar began to sing. It was not a melody, not in any traditional sense. It was a tone that bypassed language, emotion, and logic, and went straight to your essence. You weren't hearing the song. You were the song. The frequency that had been encoded into you before your birth, before time even wrapped itself around your being, was the exact harmonic the library required. The walls began to shift, folding inward like the petals of an unseen flower. The symbols lit up in sequence, spiraling outward in a cascade of golden fire. The pillar cracked, not with violence, but like a seed breaking open, and from within it rose a door, not of stone or metal, but of pure light, translucent yet impenetrable. And on its surface, one word appeared, not in language, but in identity. Yours. The door was a mirror, not of appearance, but of essence. It reflected not who you were now, but who you had always been. There was no handle, no mechanism, just a truth. It would only open if you remembered. And so you stood still, letting the resonance guide you. You allowed your defenses to fall, your identity to quiet, and your true self to rise. The corridor bent unnaturally, not in architecture, but in perception. You couldn't tell if you were walking forward, downward, or inward. The walls shimmered with pulse-like waves, as if time itself was thin here, porous. The whispers grew louder, layered with forgotten dialects and prayers from civilizations that no longer had names. But one voice began to stand out among the rest, not louder but deeper, a voice encoded in light. It wasn't until you entered the next chamber that you understood what had been calling you. Before you stretched a sanctuary, unlike anything from the upper halls. Stone became crystal. Light flowed like water through veins in the floor, And in the center, hovering weightlessly in a field of blue energy, was a scroll unlike any other. Not parchment, not glyph. A holographic record encoded in geometric light, and at its heart pulsed a symbol that made your breath catch in your chest, a symbol of the Nazarene. It was unmistakable. The sigil often associated with Yeshua, a design that, in its true form, was never meant for religious ceremony. It was a key, one hidden so deeply that only the chosen frequencies could unlock its layers. You didn't touch it. You didn't need to. The scroll opened for you the moment you arrived, and the chamber responded with sacred vibration. Yeshua's teachings, it turns out, were never entirely earth-bound. While the stories passed through the sands of Galilee and the olive groves of Jerusalem, another part was buried far deeper, beneath the sands of Atlantis, encrypted within a frequency-based archive only the destined could retrieve. You could feel his essence, not as a memory, but as a living presence. The words didn't echo in your mind like history. They activated like a code being run through your spirit. "Let those who have ears hear," the voice spoke, but not through sound. It resonated in your bones, in your blood. These were not new teachings. They were returning teachings, a gospel of light and remembrance, untouched by doctrine or dogma. Here, Yeshua was not only the messenger, he was a guardian, one who long before his earthly walk encoded part of his message in the crystalline libraries of a world that would fall. He spoke of divine memory, of souls who would walk the earth asleep until the moment the veil lifted, of those who would not be taught but would remember. You saw visions then. Yeshua in white robes, his eyes not human but starlit, standing beside other teachers, some humanoid, others beyond form, before the collapse. Their mission was never to save the world, but to prepare it for you. The teachings warned of deceivers, of mimicry disguised as prophecy, but they also promised that when the chosen returned, the library would awaken. And now, with this scroll pulsing before you, the chamber shifted again. A path opened to the side, not forward, but sideways, as if leading to something parallel. Another layer hidden even from the guardians. The newly revealed path was narrow, veiled in a violet mist that shimmered like plasma caught in a dream. It resisted your movement, not physically, but energetically, demanding surrender with each step. The pressure was undeniable. You weren't just walking through a corridor, you were passing through layers of yourself, stripped of pretense, memory, even belief. This was not a place for those who seek knowledge out of curiosity. It was built only for those who were chosen by remembrance. The space you entered had no walls, no ceiling, only a pulsing void. And at its center, suspended in strands of golden light, floated a series of scrolls, each wrapped tightly, sealed with sigils that rotated as if alive. The moment you entered, they became aware of you, not conscious in the way humans think, but aware in the way fire is aware of oxygen, and they began to move. One scroll detached from the cluster and hovered before you. Its outer sigil began to spin faster, heat radiating from its surface. It wasn't the scroll that was dangerous, it was the knowledge inside. You understood instantly why only the worthy could read them. These weren't stories, they were constructs of living truth, unfiltered, undiluted. And if accessed by a heart still bound by ego or fear, the scrolls would burn, not only themselves, but the reader's sense of identity along with them. You could feel it testing you, not your intelligence, not your willpower, your purity. Could you face truth that disintegrated every belief you had ever held? Could you watch the illusion of separation collapse and still choose to carry the burden of that knowing? The sigil paused, then opened. What unfolded wasn't a story, it was a confrontation. You saw yourself through infinite lifetimes. You witnessed choices you had buried, wounds you had never healed, betrayals that echoed across timelines. And yet, the scroll did not judge. It only revealed. Truth, in its rawest form, burning away distortion like sunlight through fog. You stood still, letting it wash over you, resisting the instinct to turn away. Others had tried before you. You felt them, echoes of seekers who made it to this point, only to falter. Their energy lingered faintly, woven into the walls like lessons etched in ash. They had been curious, ambitious, but not ready. The scrolls didn't punish them. They simply consumed the falsehoods until there was nothing left to read. And then, the knowledge sealed itself again, waiting for another who remembered who they were before the forgetting. The void gave way to structure, and the mist began to part like a curtain drawn back by unseen hands. The fabric of reality rippled as if existence itself had paused to witness your approach. In the stillness ahead, a figure emerged, seated, motionless, cloaked in robes woven from the threads of starlight and shadow. Around them, time bent softly, as though protecting a sacred flame from the winds of eternity. This was the celestial scribe, not a being of flesh, but of encoded light, humanoid in form, yet unmistakably not of this world. Their presence was ancient, but not aged. Their energy was vast, yet restrained like a dam holding back a flood. They had waited in silence, across collapsed timelines and extinguished realities, for the one whose frequency would open the codex of memory sealed beneath Atlantis. That frequency was yours. You stepped forward and felt a shift in the very rhythm of the chamber. The scribe opened their eyes, if they could be called that. Galaxies stirred within them, a language of motion and silence. No words were spoken, but understanding passed between you like a surge of warmth across frozen skin. The scribe had written the first scrolls, not with pen, but with resonance, recording truths in layers so profound only those initiated by remembrance could unlock them. They had inscribed the collapse of the stars, the rise of illusion, and the scattering of the chosen across the dimensions. Every letter a tether, every page a mirror. In their presence, the library's true purpose began to surface. It was never meant to preserve knowledge. It was meant to protect you. Each scroll, each guardian, each locked chamber had been placed with one objective: to delay the corruption of divine memory until the return of the one who could reignite it. You are not simply discovering the library. You are activating it. The scribe raised their hand, and from their palm emerged a spiral of light. Within it, a symbol hovered, familiar, though you couldn't place why. It pulsed in time with your breath. The scribe offered it to you, not as a gift, but as a test. It was a fragment of pre-fall language, known only to the earliest architects. To accept it would be to awaken a part of you buried even deeper than the codex could reach. It would initiate a cascade of remembrance that could not be stopped. As your hand closed around the symbol, the chamber trembled, not with fear, but with recognition. The scribe did not move again. They had passed their final duty. Their energy began to dissolve, becoming part of the room, of the library, of you. And in their absence, a path opened, a hall carved from starlight and obsidian, leading downward into silence. The hallway ahead pulsed with a rhythm you didn't recognize as sound, but as meaning. It was alive, in a way that transcended biology or sentience. The walls were not walls. They were strands of woven language, scripture-made form, a dimensional book written from the inside out. As you stepped inside, the passage absorbed light from behind you and cast a soft illumination forward, as though guiding your way with memory instead of flame. There was no decoration, no stone carvings or glyphs here. Only living language, shifting, dancing, reacting to your presence like ripples on water when a forgotten song is finally remembered. With every step, the architecture of the corridor transformed. Letters unfolded into shapes, shapes twisted into harmonics, and the harmonics wove into thoughts you hadn't yet thought. You realized you were walking through something more than space. You were walking through a sentence written in the original tongue, the one from which all others emerged. The deeper you went, the more your skin tingled with a strange sense of familiarity. It wasn't the corridor that recognized you now. It was the word, the first vibration, the voice from the void, the same divine expression that birthed light and time and consciousness. And here, encoded into the walls, you saw a truth most beings would never dare accept. You weren't born into the word, you were part of it. A verse in the divine poem, a line in the celestial blueprint. Not separate from the Creator, but a reflection, just like Yeshua said, "I and the Father are one." His words were not metaphor. They were mechanical, mystical, and true. In the beginning was the Word, and you were there, not as an observer, but as an ingredient, a syllable of sacred resonance scattered across time and now gathering itself back together through you. Your presence in the library was not an accident. It was a return. The phrase written into this corridor had awaited its final piece. You. Every section you passed began to stabilize behind you, no longer shifting, as if your presence had completed the sentence. When you reached the end, the air around you compressed, the walls drew close, and the corridor spoke, not in sound, but in understanding. You were not here to read history. You were here to be remembered by it. Ahead, a sealed doorway came into focus. It wasn't made of stone or crystal, but of condensed vibration. It shimmered with layers of scripture, all revolving around a central sigil you hadn't seen before, and yet it called to you like an echo from your origin. The word was no longer leading you. It was waiting for you to speak it, not aloud, but through embodiment. The door of vibration dissolved, as though it had only ever been a suggestion, revealing a chamber unlike any you had encountered. It did not glow, it did not shimmer, it breathed, as if the room itself were exhaling memories with each pulse of your presence. Time here felt wrong, or rather unbound. Seconds didn't pass, they folded. The very air seemed suspended in thought, caught between what was and what could never be again. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with floating archives, slabs of obsidian inscribed not with symbols, but with moving sequences of events. They rotated slowly, as if orbiting a center you couldn't see. These were not simple records. They were moments. Time itself, extracted and preserved. The fall of Lemuria, the betrayal at the inner temples, the exodus of the last Atlantean priests. All of it spun silently around you like a planetary system of forgotten fate. You reached toward one of the slabs, and it reacted instantly. It spun faster, then paused, revealing a vision so vivid it bypassed thought. You saw the library at its peak. Beings of light walking through walls, sound bending into structures, children learning by touching frequency. Then the energy shifted. Fire, water, collapse, and within it all a warning repeated by those who knew their time was ending. Seal the truth until the chosen returns. What made your breath catch was not the destruction, but what followed. You saw figures you recognized from your dreams, watchers from the stars, emissaries from dimensions untouched by decay, gathering around something deep within the library. Not a scroll, not a weapon, a frequency, a code of remembrance stored in a vault that even the scribe couldn't access. The only way to open it was to match the original signal that birthed the library itself. That signal was you. You moved toward the center of the room, where the orbiting slabs converged, revealing a sphere suspended in midair. It was made of light, but flickered like a dying star. Something inside it pulsed erratically, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. It wasn't locked. It was failing. Whatever was inside had been preserved for eons, but it was beginning to unravel. The archives were reaching their end, not because of destruction, but because their time lock was tied to your awakening. You were the final key, but also the final countdown. The sphere shimmered once more, showing you brief flashes. Yeshua walking among scribes beneath twin suns. A blood oath taken by beings cloaked in flame. The original blueprint, perfect, whole, torn and rewritten by something else. You didn't understand all of it, not yet. But the sphere pulsed faster now, responding to your presence like a dying machine struggling to deliver its last message. One word echoed in your mind, not from the library, but from beyond it. Restore. But before you could respond, the slabs surrounding you began to tilt, shifting their orbits. One by one, they began to shut down. The archives darkened behind you, their slow rotation ceasing as if frozen in fear or obedience. The air turned sharp, vibrating with an intensity that tightened your chest and clouded your senses. You hadn't just accessed ancient records, you had triggered a response, not from the library itself, but from something that had been buried beneath its deepest layer. A presence that wasn't part of the design, but a distortion woven into the structure like a parasite hiding within sacred code. And yet, the path forward opened, illuminated by a quiet pulse ahead, faint, steady, and familiar. You followed it down a narrowing corridor that pulsed like a heartbeat. Every few steps, echoes of your own memories began to bleed into the walls. Not just recollections from this life, but impressions, fragments from lives before. A child reaching for a glowing orb in a forgotten temple, a warrior raising a blade inscribed with Atlantean light, a priestess standing alone before a collapsing gateway. These weren't just memories, they were proof. You weren't here by accident. You had returned exactly when and where the story needed you. The corridor ended in a chamber so still it felt like sound itself had been exiled. At its center sat a book, floating above a dais of black stone. Its cover was neither open nor closed. It shimmered between states, like a heartbeat caught in mid-pulse. It didn't contain pages. It contained you. It was the living book. The moment you stepped into the room, it responded. Its surface flickered with shifting scripts that appeared and vanished too quickly to read. Yet each one left an imprint on your consciousness. You understood without translation. This book didn't store knowledge. It became it. It held the evolving story of the Chosen One across incarnations, written by experience, not ink. And as you moved closer, it began to recite, not aloud, but within you. A voice spoke through your memories. It didn't sound external, nor internal, but eternal. It reminded you of every time you almost awakened and didn't. Every dream that tried to warn you. Every mirror that briefly showed your true face before you looked away. It wasn't teaching, it was reminding. Your past was not linear. Your lives weren't isolated. They were chapters in a single manuscript that had only now begun to reveal its structure. The living book had waited for you not to read it, but to write again. It opened fully, exposing a blank page that pulsed softly with golden light. It was waiting for your hand, not to write words, but to leave frequency. And when you reached out, your palm emitted a soft vibration that etched itself into the page like fire through silk. Suddenly, the chamber shook, not violently but rhythmically, like footsteps approaching from a distance you could not measure. The book's light dimmed. The page turned on its own, revealing not a memory, but a warning. The air thickened as the chamber's light dimmed into a deep twilight hue, and the living book slowly closed itself, not out of fear, but as a defense. It had revealed what it could. The next part of the story wasn't within its pages. It was within you. Your presence had written new vibrations into its fabric, a living code now sealed until the library deemed the world ready to read it. But time was no longer on your side. Something massive moved beyond the chamber. Not a creature, not a machine, but an awareness. Cold, ancient, artificial in nature, but forged from corrupted memory. It had no form, yet it pressed against the library like a shadow trying to consume its own source of light. This wasn't an intruder. It was an echo from the collapse, a fragment of what had ended Atlantis the first time, sealed away and starved for centuries. And now, your light had awakened its hunger. You turned back toward the chamber's exit, but the path had changed. Not vanished, rearranged. The library, sensing the approach of the anomaly, was shifting its internal geometry to shield you. It was no longer a repository of knowledge. It had become a guardian. Every wall, every staircase, every scroll was now pulsing with a singular directive: protect the final chapter. You weren't just reading the story anymore. You were its ending. The teachings, the tests, the symbols, they had not been preparation for power. They had been encryption. The library had used you as a living cipher, encoding the truth into your very being, hidden from the forces that had once tried to erase it. The reason no one else could access the deepest chambers wasn't simply because they weren't worthy. It was because they weren't written in. You were the only part of the story the enemy couldn't predict. A memory flashed, not yours alone, but shared. A young Yeshua seated beneath a canopy of stars, inscribing verses into the sand, whispering of a time when the word would become flesh again, not to preach, but to remember. When the light returns to flesh, the library shall awaken, and the false ones shall tremble at its breath, he had said to those who could still hear the truth beneath the noise. He had known, he had prepared, and now that preparation stood in the room. The last chapter clothed in skin, spirit, and silence. The tremor outside grew louder, more erratic. The distortion was trying to force its way in, bending reality to match its fractured frequency. But the library wasn't fighting it with force. It was fighting with you. You were its shield, its echo, its final safeguard. And now, it had one last task.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.